Welcome to our virtual watercolor party. My name is Shalom, and I'm so excited that you're joining me to paint today. I'm from Arizona, and I know that may have caused a few issues with the time zone, so I'm sorry about that. But yeah, I think it's so cool that we can paint together virtually from all over the world. I know some of you have told me you're from the East Coast and some from the West Coast, so yeah, I'd love to know where you all are from. You can type that in the comments, so all of us watercolor buddies can just see where we're from. It's really cool. In this live event, we will be painting this kaleidoscope of sunflowers. If you haven't already, I encourage you to take a look at the discussion section in the event. You'll find, oh, we've got one from Chino, California. That's cool. Anyways, in the discussion section, we have several resources like this tracing sort of paper, and yeah, just lots of supply notes and things. Oh, and we've got one from, no, not New York City. I'm not sure where that one would be from. Okay, and then let's see, what else? Several of you have asked if this video will be available following the live recording, and the answer is yes, it will. The cool thing about doing it live is you can interact though, and so that's what's fun about being live. You can ask me questions, I can ask you questions, and yeah, it's just fun. A few of you have also asked about my background with painting. I cannot remember a time that I have not been creating or drawing or something like that, but I did start painting watercolor 5 years ago, and I've just been hooked. I love it. Let's see. I am also curious about your experience with watercolor. If you don't have any experience, or if you do, that will help me shape what I talk about, because I get very excited about watercolor, so I can talk a lot about it, and I don't want to bore you or overwhelm you with details. So please let me know in the comments also how much experience you have. Wow, we've got people from all over, Arizona, California, all kinds of places. This is so exciting. No, I have someone asking me if I do acrylic painting tutorials. No, Christina, right now I don't do acrylic painting tutorials. I'm mostly focusing on watercolor right now because I just love it, and I know there's so many other people who love acrylic, so they would probably be better at doing that. Yeah, let's see. I think that's all the notes I've got, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Oh, very cool. We've got a few people who have a little experience, and this is so fun. I'm very excited. Yeah, so let me go ahead. I'm gonna just turn the camera around, so if you get dizzy easy, close your eyes for a second. Let's see, how do I, oh, it won't let me. Let's see if I can make sure you can see this. I can't tell for sure. Okay, hopefully you can see that all right. I don't want to be upside down. Okay, we're good. I'm actually going to raise this a little bit so you can see more. Yeah, that should be good. Okay. Alright, so the supplies that we have here, these are the paints that we'll be using. Hopefully you can see this all right. I can't see the camera very well because it's upside down for my vision. But here we have alizarin crimson, aureolin yellow, ultramarine blue, and burnt sienna. burnt sienna is optional. You can totally create a brown with your primaries, but I have it here just in case. Okay, let's see here. The other, I'm just reading all your comments. The other thing is tissues. Tissues are really helpful. Can you see those? Not sure. But anyway, I use toilet paper. You can use tissue paper, paper towels, whatever you like. Art tape, I use this to tape the paper down, so that will help prevent warping. A pencil and an eraser, or a pencil with an eraser, whatever you have, totally fine. A compass, that's for the circle. You can trace a jar or tape or whatever too if you don't have one. A ruler. Okay. Oh, this is so cool. We've got people from the East Coast too. I'm just gradually reading your comments. If you saw in the discussion, I have this tracing option for you. I am going to go ahead and draw the whole thing just from scratch, but if you prefer tracing, this is available in the discussion. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all the supplies that we'll be doing. Water, of course, and salt. Those are the other two. I usually just keep my salt in a bag. This is table salt. Okay. So I am going to start by demonstrating the techniques that we'll be doing. The first technique is a wash, and there's two different types that we'll be using. Let me go ahead and pour some of this paint on. I usually use tubes as opposed to the pans because the tubes have more pigment in them. So they tend to be brighter, and I really like bright colors. So this is the ultramarine again. Put this on here. And then we have the Raylan. Oh yes, I will try to speak louder. I'm sorry. I get so focused on what I'm doing. Normally I'm just so quiet when I'm painting, so yes, I will do my best to speak louder. Let me know if you can't hear me. I will speak louder anytime. Okay, and then this is the burnt sienna, and I will put that there. Okay. So we have our paints now. I'm going to grab a little water. And this is my number 6 brush. This is a nice medium size, but if you have other sizes, like a 4 will work too or whatever, I just like this one because it's a nice medium size. Okay, so the first wash that I'm going to demonstrate, and this is just practice. We'll do the real painting in a minute. But the first wash is called a wet and wet wash, and that is where you get the paper wet first, and then you'll charge the paper with pigment, which is the paint. Pigment is just color. It's actually a powder that they mix with other binders and things, and so yeah, it's very cool. You can always tell what is wet because it will be a little shiny. And so we've got that little rectangle all wet. I'm going to pick up some paint here and put that in. And you can see it just floats around. It kind of paints itself, which is one of the fun things about watercolor that I like so much. Okay. And then you just fill that in, and that is called a wet and wet wash, and we'll be using that quite a bit. The second wash is wet and dry, and so that means the paper is dry and the paint is wet. So I'll pick up some more paint here, and I'll just go straight in. Alright, and so that is our wet and dry wash. I like using these for smaller details, and I like to use the wet and wet for larger sections. The wet and wet is really nice because if I need to work fast, then I can just get the area that I'm working on all wet first, and then I don't have to worry about my paint drying before I've spread it all out. Okay, and then the next technique is using our salt here. Salt with water is so cool. It creates a reaction where the salt pushes the pigment away. And so while the paint is still wet, you just sprinkle a little salt on there, and as it dries, you'll notice that the salt is pushing the pigment away, creating a really beautiful texture. And we will use that texture in the middle of the sunflowers. Okay, just reading your comments to make sure I'm not missing anything that you're asking. Okay, cool. Hopefully I'm speaking loud enough now. Oh, this is neat. You can kind of see it a little bit in this one. I didn't sprinkle much salt, but as this dries, you'll be able to see more. While that's drying, let's go ahead and start drawing our sunflowers. I typically make these paint party paintings about 8 by 10, and the reason for that is because 8 by 10 is a standard American frame size, and so you can easily find a frame for it. So I'm just going to go ahead and measure my paper to be 8 by 10. I'll just mark the edges here. Okay, top and the bottom. Oh good, I'm glad the volume is better for you now. This is good. Okay, we've got the bottom here, and then we'll do our sides. Alright, and now I am going to tape this sheet of paper down to this little board that I have right here. And that will help prevent the paper from warping, because as I'm sure most of you know, when you put water on paper, it tends to warp and wrinkle. And so to avoid that, we kind of stretch it out. Alright, so this is art tape. A couple of you have asked me about it. Art tape is basically just a type of tape that's less adhesive than, say, your normal Scotch tape. So when I take it off this paper, it won't tear the paper or anything like that. It's just more gentle. The paper I'm using, by the way, is cold press. There's about 3 different types of watercolor textured papers: hot press, cold press, and rough. And cold press is just kind of in the middle, and it's a good texture to start with if you're a beginner. And it's just all around very, very nice to work with. I also like Arch's brand watercolor paper, and that's because it is 100% cotton. And so I really like the way it interacts with the water and the pigment on the paper. I'm just taping that down. Oh yeah, if you do the painting in a book, don't even worry about taping it. It's not a big deal. The tape is honestly just to help prevent warping. So if you don't have tape, or if you're painting in a sketchbook or something like that, I just noticed that someone was asking about painting in a book. So yeah, don't worry about that. I really just like being relaxed when I'm painting, so I don't usually worry about too many little details. The most important thing is just to paint and to have fun. And that is why this is a party. It's just pure fun. I love it. All right. Now I'm going to mark the center of this paper because I want the sunflower to be in the center. So we'll just mark 5 inches in the middle on our longer edge, and then 4 inches in the middle on this shorter edge, and then I can mark where I want the center to be, which would be around 5 inches, right there. Perfect. And then this is our compass. I think I made mine about 2 inches in diameter last time I did it. You, obviously, it's your painting. Make it however big you like. Just gonna mark it this way really quick. There we go. Okay. So we just have our little circle right here. And that is the center of our sun. So we're essentially painting sunflowers inside of a sun, which is kind of fun. I can explain. We have our sun with all the little triangles. Some of you have also asked if I use the tape to mask these triangles. I did not use tape to mask the triangles. You are more than welcome to do that if that makes it easier for you. I don't, and I'll demonstrate what I do shortly. Okay, let's see. To do the triangles, I just kind of marked out about 1/2 inch away from the circle. And I made them about 1/2 inch tall on either side. I'm not sure if you can see. I'll show this up close. Those are just my little 1/2 inch marks. I kind of like to be symmetrical, so I just do that. But if you just want to draw your triangles without measuring, go for it. Okay, we've got some triangles here. Those are the 4 corners. You can do it the same way from the corners, about 1/2 inch diagonally. And there we have it. All right. So we have those triangles for our sun, and then I'll just add in a few in between these. I'm going to make them go a little farther out, like this. Hopefully you can see. Okay, there we go. I went to a sunflower field about a week ago, and it was really quite fun because I had just painted this about a week before I went, and I just love sunflowers. They're so happy, and this is their season, so they're all out and about. It's really, really cool. To be honest, I like pretty much all the flowers, but that's beside the point. Okay, so now we have our little sun with all the triangles and the circle. And now I'm going to go in and do the inner parts of our sunflower. Washi tape. Someone's asking if I use washi tape. I'm actually not familiar with that type of tape. I imagine if it's not super sticky, it should work just fine. That's the only real difference between art tape and other kinds of tape. Yeah, someone else said they're just free-handed triangles. Yeah, go for it. That's totally fine. Okay, let's draw the centers of our sunflowers here. I'm just gonna go right in, do a nice half moon shape right here. So fun. Got another one going right next to it. Nice big centers. Love it. And then this short one up at the top. And you can see that, hopefully. Okay. And now I'm just going to do the petals. Petals are so fun. Here's actually, these are Black-Eyed Susans, but the petals are all different shapes, and so you don't really have to be like perfectly spot on. You just kind of have fun with all the little curves that every petal has. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna go right in, play around with all these curves. They are just so pretty. And you really don't need to be super, well, try to match mine perfectly or anything. It's your painting, so you can make it unique just like you. Alright. Kind of skipping a few sections because I want to put some petals behind these ones. Overlap them a little bit. This is a kneaded eraser. I love using mechanical pencils and kneaded erasers because kneaded erasers are more gentle than the harder plastic ones. I can just kind of pick up the graphite from the paper, and it doesn't really mess with the fibers of the paper too much. So that's why I love using kneaded erasers. I have a tendency to play with them too. They're like Play-Doh. they're quite fun. Alright, so we have our petals for that one. We'll go ahead and do these ones right here. I'm really so thrilled with the response to this party. Thank you again for joining. I really love painting with people, so this is just so fun for me. And hopefully fun for you as well. Just play. I'm leaving a few little windows here so that I can put some blue in. Blue is the complementary color to orange, so it really helps these sunflowers pop out, and it's just fun. I love colors, what you can do with them and what you can express. So glad that we live in a color world. Okay, so we have the whole design here. Hopefully you can see that. If I need to zoom out or zoom in for anything, just let me know. Someone's asking if I'll leave the video up. Yes, the video will be available after and of course during the live event. It will pop up like a post, just like my last live recording. All right. If you are tracing, you would print the image out that I gave you, put it on tracing paper, and then put the graphite side over your paper, and then take a pencil and rub the graphite onto your paper. So for those of you who are doing that option, that's how that will work. All right, so we get started here. I am going to get my palette back on here and set that aside. So I'm going to just take some pure plain water and go on to the center of this big sunflower here in the middle. And if you have the brown, you can put the brown in. I'll do that for this one, and then for the next one I'll mix it so you can see how it works both ways. Look at that, it just spreads all out. So pretty, love it. Watercolor paint tends to dry lighter than when you first put it on the paper. So you can go pretty bright, obviously not too dark, but don't be too shy. And you can always go darker as well, so better to be on the light side. Okay, in the edges here, I'm going to put a little ultramarine, and that will help the center to pop out more. Just gives it a little dimension. So fun. And it will also help the petals to pop out a little more as well. Okay, and then while this is still wet, I'm going to drop some of the salt in, and that will give the sunflower some seed-like texture. So we'll drop that in. And you can see, come up a little closer. Okay. And then I'll just let that dry. And I'll go on to this other big section, starting with some pure water. Just go right in. For this one, I'm going to demonstrate mixing a brown. So I'll get some of my yellow here, pick up a little of the blue, and then a good amount of my red. And that will make the brown. It's really, really good to work with a limited palette. That helps you to avoid what they call muddy colors. Again, I apologize. I tend to get really quiet when I'm focused on details. Alright, just filling those in. And then I'll pick up some of the ultramarine. Put that on the edges. If your brush ever has too much water on it, like if the pigment is just runny as you put it on, you can hold the very tips of the hairs right here and squeeze out some of the water. So that's what I was just now doing because my brush was a little too wet for what I wanted it to do. Okay, and there's that one. And then quickly, while it's still wet, I'll take some of my salt here and sprinkle it on. The other one's really working very well. I'll bring it close to the camera so you can see. So here's the salt, and you can kind of see the texture coming alive right there. Very cool. I love it. Okay. And finally, we have the center of this last little one to do. Let me get a fresh piece of paper. Okay. Starting with just pure water again. And I'm going to go ahead, go in. There we go. And again, don't hesitate to ask me questions if you have any. I'm doing my best to follow along all the comments, so I am watching. Yeah. Okay, let's pick up a little more pigment here. This time I'm going to go ahead and go back to the two brown. And you'll notice that the pigment only goes where I put water, which is another very cool thing about watercolor. So if I put water outside of my circle, then I'd be in trouble because the sunflower would be going all over the place and it wouldn't look too much like a sun anymore. And then this is the ultramarine blue on the edges. And I'll grab my salt and sprinkle it on. There we go. Okay. While those are drying, I'm going to move out to these triangles. As I painted the last one, I was kind of imagining where the sunflower would go. So I think these three would be the middle of the sunflower if I continued the sunflower outside of the sun design. So I'm going to make these three brown, and then if I continued this circle out, this one would be brown, but this one would be yellow because the petals of this sunflower would come out. You can paint them whatever color you want. I'm just explaining what's going on in my head as I paint them. So no worries, do it however you like. Okay, so here I go. Picking up some of this brown, and this time I'm going to do a wet into dry. That's just easier to do for smaller sections. So for that, I'm just going to paint a little section of the circle. I'll paint the whole section right here. I'm not too worried about making these edges perfect. I like the kind of ragged, raw look of just being hand done. Sprinkle some salt on those. Okay, we'll get some more color here. Fill that one in. Okay. And sprinkle salt on while it's still wet. I really have to be fast with the salt on these wet and dry washes because they're obviously not as wet, and so they dry a lot quicker. And I should mention the reason that I have 2 jars here is I use one jar for dirty water and the other jar for clean water, so that I don't have to run all around and keep refilling jars. I actually have 4 jars up here just in case, because I don't want to have to run away while I'm painting this. Okay, I'm going to move up to these 2 while I'm using the brown. So cool, I just love it. You can play around with these 2 and like stick a hint of ultramarine in the edge, just play with it. That's honestly all I do with watercolors, just play with it. Every single time I paint is a learning opportunity. Every time I learn something new, and it's just so exciting. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start painting the petals. When I was painting these sunflowers, I was looking at a photo that had 3 different colors of sunflowers on it. There were yellow sunflowers, red sunflowers, and purple sunflowers. And I thought it looked so cool, so that's what I painted. And so that's what I'll do here. I'm going to pick up a little bit of this salt before I start painting the petals. Okay, that's another thing these are really good for, picking up my salt. Okay, so for the petals, I'm just going to do the wet and wet washes for most of them again. I'm actually going to make some of my graphite a little bit lighter. The graphite can show through light colors like yellow, and so I like it to be as light as possible. The graphite to be as light as possible. Just pick up a bit of graphite here. I'm being careful not to touch this. I'm not sure if it's dry yet. I don't want to mess it up. It looks like it's mostly dry. Okay, so I'm just going to pick up some fresh clean water. Put that on my brush. I don't want it too wet because I'm doing a smaller section now. Actually, I should bring this in so you can see what I'm doing on that jar. I often tap my brush just to get little droplets out so that it's not too wet. After you paint for a while, a lot of things just become instinct and you do it without even thinking about it. So it's really good for me to slow down and explain what I'm doing. It's good practice. Okay, so I'm going to pick up some of my Aurelian here. And I'll put that in. And I want it to get a little darker as I go to the center. So I'll pick up just a teeny tiny bit of my alizarin. Alizarin is a very strong color, and it's what they call a staining color as opposed to a transparent color. So it's very dark and very brilliant if I pick up too much of it. I'm going to paint these petals, every other one, because I don't want the water to run into the petal beside it. Picking up some Aureolin. The more pigment you have on your brush, the brighter the color will be. And the more water you have on your brush, the lighter the color will be. I'm going for kind of in between. I don't want this yellow to be super bright, but nor do I want it to be too pale. There we go. And the next one, just every other one as they dry. Someone is asking if we take the salt off after drying, and that answer is yes, I will be taking the salt off shortly. I just like to wait until I know for sure that the paint is all dry, especially when I'm scraping the salt off, because there's been so many times where I have accidentally scraped the salt off while the paint is still wet under there, and then I've smudged the paint on the paper. So I try to avoid that by making sure, absolutely sure, that the paint is dry beforehand. So that's why we did the salt first, so that it could be nice and dry by the time we're all done. And then when we're done painting mostly everything else, then we'll scrape the salt off. Okay. This is a really fun brush. I think it's sable. I think it's 100% sable. Sable is a really wonderful material. It's real brush, well, real animal hair, and so it holds a lot more water than synthetic brushes. Synthetic brushes are man-made materials, and so they just work differently. They're not bad or anything. I love using synthetic brushes too, but this one's like a good in-between. It can do multiple different things. I like to have a brush that has a good point, and also that can hold a lot of water. if you can see my palette here. Okay. Doing this final one. Paintings like this are such good practice for beginners because you just do the same sort of technique over and over again, so it's good practice to get used to various techniques. And washes especially are so foundational. You use, or at least I use, and I think most other people use washes for nearly everything, every painting. I'm going to go back to these ones because these two are dry now, and so I don't have to worry about the water spreading into the other petals, or pigment spreading into the other petals. If they do, no worries. It's just another facet of the artistic expression. There are a lot of happy accidents in watercolor. It just does so many fun things. All right, got those ones. Just keep going. Pure water first, followed by the yellow. And I'm starting with the lighter color first intentionally. And then adding some orange. Not sure if you can see the palette. There we go. Okay. You can go darker on some of these and add a little variety, or lighter. There we go. And that sunflower is nearly all finished. We'll do a few more things to it. This sunflower, this medium one, I'm going to make a red sunflower. I'm going to add one more petal right here. There we go. And I want it to be yellow in the center. Or as I get closer to the center of the sunflower, I want it to be yellow. So I will show you. Again, I'm starting with just pure water, going in and making a wet and wet wash. I will pick up some Rayon and put that in the center. And then I'll pick up some alizarin. I don't want too much alizarin because, as I said, it's a staining color. It can get very bright easily. It will also stain your clothes, so be careful if you're wearing white. There we go. And then I just got my brush dry here so that I could blend these colors. There we go. I'm going to paint every other one again. So I'm going in with the yellow first because it is the lighter color, and then I'll pick up some alizarin. There we go. Going in with water. Picking up a reelin. Dropping that in. And then I'll get some red. And I'm going to squeeze that out because I don't want it to be too wet. I'm working with some smaller pieces and, oops, pencil. Okay, I'm working with some smaller sections, and so I just don't want the water to be too runny. The more runnier it is, the harder it is for me to control. And so that's why you'll often see me squeezing the hair of my brush just to get a bit of that water out so I can control the flow of the pigment a little bit more. It's really the flow of the water, because the water just likes to do its own thing, and I'm trying to make it do my thing, kind of. Okay, this is such a tiny section that I'm not going to do a wet and wet wash for this petal over here. I'm just going to go right in. And I'm going to do a wet and dry wash for this one. There we go. And now I'll come back here and do every other one again. And these are larger sections, so I will do wet and wet. Picking up some reelin, going right in, getting some alizarin, and there we go. I just love watching watercolor paint itself, essentially. It just flows all over. So pretty. Picking up a reelin again, going right in. And alizarin. There we go. And our last petal. It's again a small section, so I will just do a wet and dry wash. We'll go in with our yellow, a little bit of alizarin, and go just right in. Okay, 2 sunflowers. This last one is quite fun. It's a purple sunflower. I've never seen a purple sunflower, I don't think, unless it's been dyed. but I still think it looks cool, so I'm going for it. I'm going to do yellow near the center, just like I did for this red one. And this is quite fun because yellow and purple are complementaries, so they also kind of pop out when they're placed next to each other. There's a lot of energy in a composition with so many complementary colors. Okay, so we'll go in with our wet and wet wash. Okay. I'm actually going to zoom or show you this up close really quick just so you can see what's going on here. It looks like all our salt has dried. Yeah, so we'll keep going with the purple ones. Okay. Starting with the yellow. And then I'll mix my violet with the ultramarine and the alizarin. So I'll take some ultramarine here, and I'll pick up some alizarin, and I get that nice. I want my violet to be more of a magenta, so I'm going to put more red than blue, and I'll drop that in there. And it kind of just blends on itself. Another thing you can do is you can tilt the paper up and down to get the water to move. That's another way you can blend washes. Okay, and I will just do every other color again. Or every other petal. Pick up some Areolin. And then we'll go in with our magenta. You really don't have to worry about being too specific or too careful about making your circle perfect when you paint it. If you want to, by all means go ahead. I'm not being too particular about it because again, I kind of like that look that the edges aren't quite perfect. It just adds a little character to the piece, in my opinion. Okay, there's that one. And this one. I'm trying to keep the salt off the petals to prevent the texture, but this petal had a little piece of salt on it right there. So it has some texture, but that's totally fine because we're still going to go over these with a few lines. So we've got a lot more texture that we'll be playing with. So if there's salt on any of yours, no worries. Okay, there we go. also, if you do happen to smudge some of your pigment out, like I did right here, right there, you can scrub it out. You just get a bit of pure water, and then you push your brush over it, and that tends to lighten it. Usually synthetic brushes work better because they're a little tougher. So this is a synthetic brush, and I'm just going to smudge some of that off. And then you can pick it up. It doesn't usually get all the pigment off, but it definitely lightens it, and so it helps. There we go. Now I'm going to continue on with these petals. I'm just checking your comments to check for any other questions. Okay. Going in with some Areolin, and then I'm going to make a little more magenta here. Pick up some ultramarine. And when I mix colors, I should mention, I never push my brush straight down or anything like that. I only keep it going in the same direction as I would if I were painting, because if I pushed my brush straight down or did funky things with it, that would actually hurt the brush and mess with the hairs. So that's why you see me making all these circles all the time. Okay, we have a nice magenta, and we'll put that down. And the next one. We almost have all of our sunflowers. Again, just a wet and wet wash, going in with some water, some pigment. Watercolor tends to dry pretty fast, and that's one reason why I try to work pretty fast or paint fast, so that I can catch the water while I can. Okay. There we have those. And now I'm going to paint the background behind these petals. I'm going to paint the background ultramarine. And since they're just little detailed sections, I'm just going to go straight in and do a wet and dry wash. So I'll just pick up some ultramarine. I want it to be quite bright, so I'm picking up a lot of pigment, and I'm just going to go right in. I don't want it to be too wet, so picking that. And I don't want it to be too wet because I'm doing a detailed area, and so I want a lot of control over the water. To get a little bit more pigment. You can see, just doing these little details. There we go. And again, just a wet and dry, and I will do that for all of these little teeny tiny sections. Ideally, I would like this blue to be brighter and darker than the petals to help the sunflowers stand out more. Okay. Picking up some more color for this last little section. And then we'll paint the rest of the triangles. All right, there we have that so far. Okay. Now we'll finish up these the centers, or actually the triangles. I'm going to make them a little bit lighter. Take away some of the graphite, because I'll be working with more yellow now, and I don't want the graphite to show up. Oops. Okay, there we go. So they're lighter now. And now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do some wet and wet washes for some of these, because I'm going to do multiple colors, and the wet and wet helps the colors to blend better. They blend okay if I do it the other way as well, but I like the way it does it when I do wet and wet for the effect I'm going for right now. Again, I'm kind of just pretending that the sunflowers, I guess that the sun shape is a window onto the sunflowers. So I'm pretending that these are the edges of the petals. This time, I'm going to make this pure yellow. So I'll just do a wet and dry I'm not really going to try and blend colors too much. If I do, even, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, there we have it. We'll go in with a little bit of red on this one. Actually, I want that to be more of an orange. That's quite dark. Okay. And yellow here. I'm really not trying to be exact or follow my last one exactly. I like to take this one for how it is and play with it. Okay, let's see, we'll do this one yellow and red, I think. I want the red to be a little lighter, so I'm picking up a bit more water to lighten the red. In watercolors, you typically don't use white to make them lighter. You just add water. We'll do just pure alizarin for this one. And for this next one as well. And why not? We'll just continue the pattern. Keep going with alizarin. Okay, I might make this one blue. I think that would look cool. So I'll pick up some ultramarine. I didn't do a blue one on my last one, but I think I will for this one. Just make it more interesting. There we go. And some magenta. I'm going to mix a little bit more here. Okay. Spread that on. And for this last one, I'll do a wet and wet because I want to do magenta and yellow again. Put in our yellow and add magenta. Now you don't have to follow my colors exactly, obviously. You're painting, so you play and make it how you want it to look. Alright, I think our salt is all dry, so I'm going to go ahead. I just scrape it with my finger, rub it off, and then if you have a trash can nearby, you can dump your salt in that, or dump it on a desk and then wipe it up later. A trash can is always nice because the salt kind of gets all over the place. Okay, got that. And now I'm just going to dump this in the trash can that I have nearby. Okay, I have a little bit more salt. I will rub that off, but we're getting very close. If you get behind, don't worry about it. As I said before, this video will be available after I finish, so you can always rewind and go back. Yeah, I'm so glad you like the colors. I like the colors too. I just love bright colors. They make me so happy. And colors are amazing. They really tell a story. You can get so much feeling from them, like the whole psychology of color. Yellow is typically viewed as a happy color, blue, peaceful, and so it's really fun. Of course, it can also depend on your culture and how you view various colors and your past experiences and so on and so forth. I'm just erasing a few lines here, pencil lines. I smudged that blue a bit, but that's okay. No worries. Okay, we are down to the last little details. Let's go for it. So fun. I'm going to just use the very tip of my brush, and actually let me practice with you really quick so I can show you what I'm doing. I'm going to use the tip of my brush and just draw some lines and curls or swirls. So I'll just be doing things like this, lines and swirls. This is one reason why I use a round brush. Round brushes are very versatile in that they can do washes like this, they can do little tiny details, and it's also one reason why I try to choose a round brush that has a good point on it, so that I can do small details like this. Okay, so let's go for it. I'm going to outline the edge of the sunflower with ultramarine. And I do not want this to be very wet. So I'm going to grab some tissues here. I really want it to be dark and bright so that it stands out. Really picking up lots of color here. I can always go over it again if I want it darker, but I think I've got enough now. And so I'm just going to outline the edge. That will help it to stand out more, kind of like a cartoon, you know, they outline the edges to help things stand out. This, of course, isn't a cartoon, but the principle is the same. And now I'm going to outline the edge right here, the edge of the sun. Okay. Alright, and now I'm going to just play around and put some swirls on the center. That will add some interest and some texture and a little bit of whimsy. Just makes it a little fun. There we go. Okay, so we have the center of that sunflower all done. We'll move on to the medium sunflower with the red petals, and we'll do the same thing. I'm just going to outline, oh, and I can actually outline that little section as well, and add some swirls to these. Why not? Okay, back to this sunflower. I'm going to outline the edge. I'm going to make sure you see this. Move up. I'm just outlining the edge, and I'll do the same thing on this edge as well. I try to make these watercolor parties about 1.5 to 2 hours. So I think we're getting close to there, and we're almost finished, which is very exciting. If you've been following along, you should be very proud of yourself. This is just such a fun, but it's also kind of detailed design, so good job. Okay, and our last sunflower here. So you can see I outlined the center, and now I'm going to go in with the swirls. I tried to do the swirls at different directions, so one going left, one going right, to add some variety. It just makes it more interesting to look at that way. Okay. A little tiny one. And I'll do one up here on this triangle and on this triangle as well. All right. Okay, and now we're going to outline our petals. So we'll start by outlining the yellow petals here. I'm going to outline them with an orange, so I'm going to take some Areolin and mix it with the alizarin, and I'll have a nice orange. Kind of a medium orange is what I'm going for, right about there. And now I'm just going to outline the petals, just like I outlined the centers of the sunflowers. And then I'm also going to just make a few little lines in the center to give it that petal texture. Like, again, these aren't sunflowers, but they have a similar texture. They have all these little lines in the center, and so that's the idea that I'm going for. Yes, the edging really does make the sunflowers pop. Okay, and we'll just go all the way around. I'm making those lines all different lengths to add variety. It just makes it more interesting to look at. Variety is one of the, I think, principles of design in art. And so it's just one of those things that adds some interest and makes your eye wander over to it and think, oh, what's that? I want to go see. Someone asked what color I used for the outline and swirls on the center of the sunflowers. I used the ultramarine blue for those. I just used a lot of the pigment to make it really dark. And then for the outline of these sunflowers, I mixed the aureolin and the alizarin to make a nice orange. And then for the outline of these red flowers, I'm just going to use alizarin, which is the red. And I want it to be nice and bright, so I'm squeezing nice in with the water. We'll just go right in. I'm trying to avoid touching these orange petals until they're all dry. Okay. Picking up a little bit more alizarin. And one more red petal. I'm just outlining it with the alizarin and then adding lines in the center to mimic the lines on a real petal. There we go. Now for these last ones, I'll need to mix a nice dark magenta. So I will take some alizarin and I'll bring it over to the ultramarine and mix a nice dark magenta or violet. This looks more like a violet, but that will work. Squeeze out the excess water and go right in. I want these colors to be darker than the petals so that they will help the petals or even the centers of the sunflowers to stand out, because it's an outline and I want my outline to be nice and dark, nice and vibrant. Okay. Someone is asking if I have a Venmo account. I do, but it is not necessary whatsoever to pay me. I really enjoy teaching these classes. So no worries, just enjoy painting. Alright, we're down to our last two petals here. Okay, there we go. Now you have your composition, but it's still missing one thing, and that is your signature. Put it on bold and proud. I write my signature in Hebrew letters because my name is Hebrew. I'm not Jewish, but I really love the culture and the letters, and I just think it's really cool. So that's how I write my name. So we'll just put a little signature right there, and I always put mine in a heart because hearts are my favorite shape, and I just think love is one of the most important things. And so a heart is like a symbol, well, it's like a symbol of love and peace, I guess, for me. So there we go. My signature, the painting, and one last thing, we get to take our tape off. Even though it's art tape, I still peel it off on the gentler side. Kind of did a sloppy job on my signature, but that's okay. Normally I write it with a much smaller brush, like my 0 or 000. And we'll take the tape off this one. Okay. And there we have it. Our finished painting. You should be very, very proud of yourself for following along and making your own. If you have been following along and making your own, please post it in the comments. I would love to see, and I'm sure others would as well. I'm just going to move this down and tilt the camera up so I can see you, or you can see me, rather. Okay. There we go. Yeah, so I'm really, really thrilled with the response to this party. Am I upside down? I think maybe you can see me now. Yeah, I'm really thrilled with the response to this party. Just thank you all so much for joining along. I'll be doing another one of these in September. So if you don't already follow me on Instagram or Facebook, go ahead and do that, because that's where I post about all of these, and you'll be able to find out about the next one. Yeah, I'm just so excited, and thank you so much for joining along with me. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time. Thank you again. Turn this off.